In 2009, Pixar Animation Studios released the film Up. The story featured an elderly widower who, by tying thousands of balloons to his house, set off to see the wilds of South America to fulfill a promise made to his late wife. The image of a man floating in a house held up by balloons may have seemed amusing and unbelievable to the West, but to Japanese audiences, it no doubt reminded them of a real-life incident that took place in Japan less than 2 decades earlier. That incident was known as the Balloon Man incident. Born in 1940, Suzuki Yoshikazu graduated from the National College of Music in Tokyo before starting work at Yamaha as a piano tuner. He fancied himself an adventurer, and in the years that followed, he opened his own business selling teaching materials for music, then his own music salon, followed by his own mahjong and coffee stores, as well as a pub restaurant. It might sound like business was booming, but on the contrary. By 1990, Suzuki was 500 million yen in debt. Creditors hounded him day and night, and being a self-styled adventurer with a flair for the flashy, Suzuki soon came up with an audacious plan to pay them back. He would sail across the Pacific Ocean in a gondola held up by balloons. After coming up with his grand idea, Suzuki immediately set to work. He never explained how sailing across the ocean held up by balloons was going to earn him enough money to pay back his debt, but it was clear by this point that when Suzuki set his mind to something, he wouldn't let anything stop him. Suzuki set out on his first test flight on April 17th, 1992. At 52 years old, people had taken to calling him the Balloon Guy because of his crazy plan. Both news crews and police showed up to Suzuki's first test flight, which was to take him from Tama River in Tokyo to Kujukuri Beach in Chiba, a distance of over 100 kilometers. Suzuki tied 4 giant balloons full of helium and strapped himself into a special harness chair, despite police protests. He set off and reached a height of over 4,000 meters within 30 minutes. Japanese media kept a close eye on him, and fears for his safety grew when the temperature dropped to minus 11 degrees Celsius at his current elevation. Yet Suzuki seemed fine, and everything went according to plan, until one of the ropes holding his weight snapped at 1:20 p.m. This sent Suzuki flying higher and higher into the air, yet his quick thinking soon saved him. Suzuki cut off one of the larger balloons, which allowed him to briefly stabilize, but then this became too much as well, and he quickly began descending down into the city. Suzuki crash-landed on a rooftop in Ota Ward, only 24 kilometers from where he'd first taken off. He walked it off with a sprained wrist, and although he hadn't reached his goal of Kujukuri Beach, he considered the test flight a success. He began plans for another flight. The flight that would change his life, and that of those around him, forever. Despite police reprimands, Suzuki fully intended to keep going with his plans, and announced that his next flight wouldn't be anywhere in Japan, but all the way to Hawaii. On November 23rd that same year, he prepared a special gondola for the trip, which he named Fantasy Go. He commissioned a master basket maker in Edogawa, Tokyo, to create the gondola specially for his trip. It was made of Japanese cypress, making it highly buoyant in case of emergency, and it measured 2 meters wide and long and 1 meter high. To it, he attached 6 large vinyl balloons and 20 smaller balloons. Compared to the 4 from his first flight, this was a considerable upgrade. Inside the gondola, Suzuki prepared a week's worth of food, flying instruments, maps, clothing, and weights made of Japanese shochu. His plan was to slowly drop these weights as he sailed over the ocean to maintain his height as the helium depleted from the balloons. In theory, his plan sounded solid, if crazy, but in reality, things were about to go terribly, terribly wrong. Suzuki was joined by university professor Miwa Shigeo, 7 of his students, various reporters from the media, and the police once again. Suzuki claimed to those present that this was, in reality, only going to be a test flight. They would raise the gondola a few hundred meters into the air, test that everything was running smoothly, and then bring it back down. They rose the gondola to over 100 meters before safely bringing it back down again. Everyone was relieved, but then Suzuki threw off the gondola's moorings and once again took to the air, reportedly screaming, "I'll be back," to those still on the ground. Professor Miwa asked him where he was going, to which Suzuki screamed back, "America!" His real destination was Sand Mountain in Nevada, and he hoped to reach a height of 10,000 meters so he could ride the jet stream the majority of the way across the ocean. As you can no doubt imagine, a few helium balloons on a gondola wasn't likely to make this happen. But Suzuki had never let theory and logic get in his way before, and he didn't plan to let it now. People have long debated Suzuki's state of mind when he took off this day. He was hundreds of millions of yen in debt, on his 3rd marriage, and his family were extremely worried about him. It's unknown how his wife felt about her husband's unique plans at the time, but even if she objected, he didn't let that stop him. The Japanese Coast Guard kept a close eye on Suzuki as he soared through the sky. Unlike his first trip, this one seemed far more successful, and at 6 a.m. the next morning, Suzuki called his family from his cell phone. "The sunrise is beautiful," he told them. "I'm going to go as far as I can, so don't worry." These were the last words his family ever heard from him. On November 25th, 2 days after he set out, Suzuki sent out an SOS call. The Coast Guard found him roughly 800 meters to the east of Kinkasan, an island off Miyagi Prefecture, and close to the top of Japan's main island. He had traveled half the length of Japan in 2 days. When the search and rescue aircraft found him, Suzuki reportedly signaled that he was fine now, and they kept their distance so as not to upset the balloons. At this point, Suzuki sat 2,500 meters in the air, although he had reached a height of 4,000 meters the day before. They monitored Suzuki for 3 hours before he disappeared into some clouds. The Coast Guard lost sight of him and pulled back. Suzuki was never seen again. It wasn't until a week later, on December 2nd, that Suzuki's family officially reported him missing. The Japanese Coast Guard contacted Canada, the United States, and Russia to alert them of the missing man and to keep an eye out for either him or his gondola washing up on their shores. Neither ever did. So what happened to the balloon guy? Ultimately, nobody knows. Neither he nor his gondola were ever found, although it's likely that he crashed into the Pacific Ocean at some point, and the vast waters swallowed all evidence of the crash. Some have speculated that Suzuki actually survived and his disappearance into the clouds was actually orchestrated by the man himself. He knew the Coast Guard wouldn't follow him, and he used the opportunity to land out of sight, starting afresh with a new, debt-free identity somewhere else in Japan. Yet, Suzuki's face was extremely well known thanks to his crazy antics. So while it's a possibility, it also seems unlikely. Suzuki's wife Yukiko never gave up waiting for her husband's return, and all 3 of her daughters went on to graduate from music school like their stepfather had. Yukiko later released a book in 2000 called The Balloon Guy's Tuning, in which she spoke of the events leading up to his flight and disappearance, as well as her own dreams, thoughts, and memories of her missing husband. She reportedly refused to move from their house because she feared that if Suzuki did return, then he would no longer be able to find her. Yukiko ended up passing away in 2017 from liver cancer, only a year after she finally remarried. And as for the 500 million yen debt that Suzuki was apparently trying to fly away from, it's been reported that both Yukiko and members of his family were paying it off themselves. He may have disappeared, but his debt didn't, and his family was left to cope with both his loss and his massive debt. What do you guys think really happened to him? Did he crash into the Pacific, or did he secretly land somewhere and start anew? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you again next time.